Good morning. This is Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us here on the broadcast. We thank you and will sample your feedback towards the end of this broadcast. Honorable Jen, coming to you as we sum up on this and to get your account of whether there is an appetite for the implementation of what we have, even as the talks now come up of amendments possibly to the Constitution.
I would want to go back to what you had actually asked about the Constitution, if prior to this was observation of the Constitution. And I would want to say before the current Constitution, there was no observation of the Constitution. And it's good to note that, especially with the Bill of Rights, we need to appreciate where we've come from. Okay. That there's freedom of association, freedom of religion, freedom of expression. And those are very vital issues that never used to be observed prior to this. And I would want to bring it to light that I remember there's a day you conducted an interview with the president. And you asked him very hard-hitting questions. And to Kenyans, we may look at that as something very easy. But remembering where we've come from, our president would never have allowed you to do that. So there are very many great strides we've made with this new constitution, and even Article 37 that also allows for picketing and demonstration and all that. Those are other big strides we've made with this constitution, that a Kenyan is allowed to get out there, express themselves and say what they like or what they don't dislike. Again, of course, on the gender issue, I would want to remind Honorable Mbui that on the 2/3 gender rule, let us try and start it in the small ways that we can. Like now looking at the dialogue committee that is currently ongoing. Kenya Kwanza observed the not more than 2/3 gender rule. In the team of 5, we have 2 women. Unfortunately, Azimio sent 1 woman in a team of 5. So let us start it in the small way, because it is in the small action that we send a message to the country that women can actually be on the decision-making table and be at the top level of that table. So in regards to that, I believe we are making good progress with the constitution. And of course, we must observe that even Kenya becoming a multi-party state is something that has improved our democracy. And we look forward to even it becoming a bigger and wider space for the country.
Okay, Honorable
when the bombshell was dropped, the BBI, by Justice Daniel Musinga, he actually said very clearly that the implementation of the Constitution was the big problem. And I think that remains still the big problem. So as much as we want to go and review on our Constitution, we need to implement the articles that are provided for in the Constitution 2010. The following articles have not, and I think have been mentioned by my colleagues here. One is on the aspects of the devolved functions. The devolved function have not been transferred fully to the county government for the last 10 years, from 2013. And I think that was basically because of the executive and administration of that time. For the last 10 years that we've been implementing this constitution, the executive have not been very keen in ensuring that there is transfer of functions to the county government. And I want to appreciate the current president in this first year saying that he wants now to transfer the functions. That is, if the executive of the last 10 years wanted to implement the constitution, probably will be much more ahead of what we are in today. The second one is on the aspects to deal with the release of the funding. It was in the constitution that the national government is supposed to timely release funding to the county government. But for the last 10 years, county government have actually been going to the following financial year with a lot of arrears. And so we build a lot of pending bills. And Kenyans are suffering, those who are actually contracted to do work in the counties. The first time this year, when the President Ruto came in, for the first time, counties have been able to receive their funding at the end of the financial year. So it basically means that even the non-implementation of our constitution was basically at the whims of the executive. Look at the 2/3 gender rule. The 2/3 gender rule have not been achieved. And it is in the constitution. And like what Mbui said, it's very clear when we do an election to try to achieve the 2/3 gender rule, it's very difficult because the public is electing the people that are able to convince them more, and probably the women have not been able to convince the people more. And so I think that part is very difficult on an election. But the executive is supposed to show a way in terms of how are they doing appointments. And I think this administration, look at the cabinet's formation this time. Look at the principal secretary formation. You can see more women now coming into the forefront in terms of the appointments. But I think we need to look at something about the election, so that do we want to go to the proportional representation like was proposed by the BBI? Probably that way we can then have a party list that then have women come in. I think then if you look at that, Daniel Musinga was not right. We have the constitution that allows us to do what we're supposed to do, but we have failed to do it. The only thing that I think this country has gotten right is the respect of the rule of law. The respect of the rule of law is when the courts pronounce itself, we've been able to follow. And the courts have never gone to bed since 2010 with the executive. We saw the BBI, which was a popular initiative pushed by the government. It was actually a government, not a popular. It was a government initiative. But it was rejected by the courts. That basically mean that we were able to follow that. Look at even what has happened now. The courts have really rejected many things that have been proposed by the executive, and the executive has followed it up. So the only savior that we've had all this time in the implementation of the 2010 Constitution. And
that's worth celebrating, isn't it? When
it is worth celebrating, of course.
Okay, worth celebrating. And there's no point of the judiciary getting in bed with the executive, because they ought to be interdependent, but there also has to be a guardrail system of governance where one party checks over the other in terms of excesses and constitutional encroachment. Because look at one of the indictment of the judgments by the courts that the president, then Uhuru Kenyatta, hijacked the popular initiative route to amend the constitution from the ordinary citizens. And that clearly shows you the extent with which you have to follow the latter of this constitution without willy-nilly overlook of its dictates. Shifting our attention to what's ongoing at the Bomas of Kenya and the talks between the government and the opposition meant to cool down the temperatures in the country following the uncertain months in the aftermath of the elections in August last year. Here is what the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua had said, and also other leaders, among them Raila Odinga, the opposition leader, and President William Ruto, on what's happening at the Bomas of Kenya.
Mazungumzo yanaendelea inaongozwa na Mheshimiwa Kalonzo. Hapo hakuna kitu mgoje. There is nothing for you to eat from there. 2018 Raila alienda handshake na Uhuru Kenyatta. Hakumwambia Kalonzo. Hakuenda na yeye. Akaenda akatengeneza deal yake na Uhuru Kenyatta wakamalizana. Project zote alitoa kwa Uhuru akapeleka kwao. Kuna project alienda na Ukamani? Lakini nyinyi hata hatuelewi nyinyi. Baada ya kufanyia nyinyi hiyo tena mkamfuata tena mkaanguka naye. Mazungumzo yanaendelea inaongozwa na Mheshimiwa Kalonzo. Hapo hakuna kitu mgoje. There is nothing for you to eat from there. 2018 Raila alienda handshake na Uhuru Kenyatta. Hakumwambia Kalonzo. Hakuenda na yeye. Akaenda akatengeneza deal yake na Uhuru Kenyatta wakamalizana. Project zote alitoa kwa Uhuru akapeleka kwao. Kuna project alienda na Ukamani? Lakini nyinyi hata hatuelewi nyinyi. Baada ya kufanyia nyinyi hiyo tena mkamfuata tena mkaanguka naye.
That is the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. Senator Medhu, coming to you. I mean, how do you address as a leader the mixed messaging? Because Gachagua says whatever is happening at the Bomas of Kenya is inconsequential. The president says he supports the course undertaken by the National Dialogue Committee.
Maybe I would have wanted to hear, Lidi, where you say that the president expressly says that there is anything much that will come out of it. Maybe he says that he supports, and the deputy president has not said that he does not support. And I'm of the opinion, just like the deputy president, that these talks, when they were before, they were just within the confines of Parliament, they would have made more sense. And this is my thinking. Although the agenda has not been sent out on what has been agreed to be part of the talks, if then what had been proposed shall be the agenda, then I would want to know, when we are talking of the embedment of the position of the Prime Minister, when we are talking of the creation of the position of the leader of the opposition, the two-thirds implementation, entrenchment of CDF and the Senate fund, and maybe the last one I'll remember. How then does Kalonzo Musyoka and Cecily Mbarire play in that kind of a setting? No, that is a preserve of Parliament. How is it different from the memo that had been sent by the President to Parliament? I mean, that is the work of Parliament. There is nothing that would require people to sit down. And there's nothing that, even these are the issues that made the Raila team to go to the streets. Yeah. Weren't they issues that would have been addressed by Opio and I and Mbowe here because they are in the leadership of Parliament? These are the issues that they should have brought before Parliament, because there is nothing that Kalonzo Musyoka can be able to do in entrenchment of CDF or the Senate fund. That's a preserve of Parliament. I think that is where it is, if you look at it in the lens, from that lens, my brother, then you see that there's nothing that you would expect that will come out of these talks. If you say that these talks will cool the temperatures of the country, then do you think then it was fair that the temperatures were taken up? Why would you? What becomes of the person who lost their business? What becomes of the person that lost their family? What becomes of the policeman who lost their, or who was beaten by and all these kind of losses that we as a country have experienced? If we do not institutionalize our politics, then this shall become the cycle, year in, year out. You take the politics up, you do your bargain, you then do some funny talks, then you take the people of Kenya for a ride.
Okay. Senator Medu, when you say you don't support this and that you echo similar sentiments as the Deputy President, your Deputy Party Leader, I mean, then you have representatives in the ongoing talks and led by Kimani Ichung'wah, the Majority Leader and the Kikuyu lawmaker, and other high-ranking members, including Governor Cecily Mbarire of Embu County. I mean, do you pick up this matter with the party leadership here? I mean, to be specific, the president who commissioned this, and then the deputy seems to be opposing it. Is this a discussion that you have inter-party in the confines of the UDA party and raise these substantial questions that you are raising here?
Let me say this. First of all, you know that we have been called for a special sitting tomorrow so that we can commission the committee, and I'll vote in support because I respect the opinion of the other people. I'm also giving my own opinion. The Deputy President is giving his own opinion. Okay. The members of my coalition who are here, they know that when I got an opportunity to speak in the parliamentary group, I mean, I never felt that there's anything, unless there's any new agenda that is coming out of this talk, I never felt that, it's not that I'm saying that we should start the talks. Yep. If the talks will be, if that is what the opposition, because I was made to believe that the opposition said that we now want to leave the streets. We don't have a way of leaving the streets. You just have to organize some way of us leaving the streets. And then the bipartisan talks were born out of that.
Okay, Senator Medu, this is the question then. You said that the talks will not yield any positive outcome. Yet you are saying that in the special
session... talks will, maybe I need to put it this way so that we are on the same page. I'm not saying that the talks will not yield anything. If the talks will deal with the issues that had been proposed in the agenda then, I'm saying then the talks were not necessary. Because these talks then will have to come to Parliament. There's not, the 10-member committee led by Kalonzo Musyoka and Kimani Ichung'wah cannot do entrenchment of CDF. They have to come to Parliament. So this work then was, this process of this bipartisan talk would then have been overtaken by event if we are the people that will do the work that is supposed to come out of this committee.
Okay. My question, do you support what's ongoing at the Bomas of Kenya? That's my question.
I support. Okay. I support.
Okay. Yes. Because I wanted to seek that clarity. You said you share the similar sentiments as the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, and that you will support if that matter, when that matter comes up before the special session of the Senate. Coming to you, Honorable Robert Mbui, seems to be mixed signals coming out of what's happening in Bomas of Kenya and what's happening in the political arena. I mean, for Kenyans, this seems to be the point of driving them to confusion as to who they will listen to of these two mixed messages from both ends.
Yeah, thank you, Ayub. And I mean, listening to Senator here, it's very clear that there is a problem. He says, I will support it, I don't support it, I'll vote in its favor, it should have been done in Parliament. I mean, there's such confusion coming from Kenya Kwanza on this matter. And then even that thing of arguing that, it's like Azimio wanted to find a soft landing to leave the streets. Every time they say that, it irritates me because we started the first half of these discussions on the Constitution. And the Constitution is clear about our rights to picket and demonstrate under Article 37. Mm-hmm. So the mixed messages are really, really annoying. And let me say this, Ayub, the fact is this, that even when we were re-elected, the first thing the President did is he sent a memo to Parliament. Now, in that memo, he's talking about entrenching office of the official leader of opposition, constitution. He's talking about the issue of the Prime Cabinet Secretary becoming constitutional, and then, of course, all the other changes to NCDF and all that. But let me tell you, under the constitution, current constitution, it cannot be done in Parliament. Let us be real. Because Article 255 of the Constitution indicates what are the things that can be changed in the Constitution and what can be done in Parliament under Article 257, and 256, and what can be done under popular initiative under 257. Yes. Now, clearly, you cannot change the structure of the presidency, which is a Prime Cabinet Secretary, unless you go to a referendum, and that means we go back to the people. So you cannot ignore the people. We cannot sit here in the studio and say that we do not need the people's involvement. We can do this as Parliament. No, we cannot. We need the people. We need to involve the people all the way from the beginning. And let me say, I think there is a problem within the Kenya Kwanza leadership. Because why is it the head of state stands up and says he supports an initiative and puts a team together to go talk to our team? And the deputy goes to every opportunity he gets. He wants to rubbish the same process. Okay. What was the purpose of Parliament sitting down and discussing and voting in support and in favor of the National Dialogue Committee if the Deputy President the next day goes to Ukambani and goes and insults the same process? I think we need to get our act together. I believe that anyone who's opposed to the talks is an enemy of the country. And I will say this because the Deputy President has been clear. He is very unhappy about any engagement with us who are in the opposition. Okay. I think it needs to come out clearly that there is nothing wrong being in the opposition. All we did is we elected someone and he's not president. That doesn't make us enemies of those that have their president in office. We are still the same country. Our problems are the same. Cost of living is high for everyone. So we cannot go to that level where every time we stand up and get an opportunity, we want to say as we are up there and you are down there. It's not fair, it's not right, and the Deputy President needs to be called out. He came to our region, lectured our people. We are very disappointed. Every time he gets an opportunity in funerals, yep, instead of condoling with the bereaved, he is there, bad-mouthing our leadership, bad-mouthing our party, bad-mouthing the process of bringing Kenyans together. I want to tell him that at that level, that the office that he's holding, okay, he must find a way to unite Kenyans. That is a unifying office. If he comes to our region, even if we didn't vote for Kenya Kwanza, he should respect our wishes. It was our decision, but that doesn't make us his enemies. He should just listen to us and agree that we are all Kenyans and all of us deserve to get the services. And this talk of constantly saying that nothing will come out of the talks. How can nothing come out of talks that are beating the top leadership positions and that parties in the country, and that is Azimio and Kenya Kwanza together to come up with solutions for the country? How can you already rubbish that before you give it an opportunity? I think there are people who are uncomfortable because I think they see ghosts where there are none.
Okay, yes, Honorable Kagiri, you have a point in regards to whether there can be a conclusive outcome of these talks to address some of the pertinent issues that the Kenyan people are concerned about or are worried by.
Thank you, Ayub. Allow me to start by stating that I'm a strong believer in democracy. And I speak from experience because 2013 I lost the election. And when I lost the election, I remember the following day sending a congratulatory message to my competitor, and I told her I wish her the best, and it ended at that. Now I will state what I stated on the floor of the House. I am supporting the dialogue talks with the reservations. And my reservations are that these dialogue talks must be about the country and not about individuals. And of course, I must state, by the dialogue talks happening, it's of course an issue of compromise and collaboration, because I believe nobody is happy with the situation we were in as a country. Not Kenya Kwanza, not Azimio. And that is why I support the talks. We must bring back our country together. We must unify our people, because whatever the case, our country will not progress without the unity. And of course, that is what I expect from the dialogue committee, that even as they're going into these talks, if we are talking about entrenching the CDF and GAF into the constitution, let it be all about the country and not about individuals. Because, Ayub, if we look at a situation of where we had lost our public confidence, yep, I remember you'd walk around the streets, even walk into a salon, and the lady will tell you, on Tuesday, I may not come to work because there'll be maandamano. Investor wants to come into this country, had the doubt of what if this thing erupts into severe violence. This is what we want this committee to do. Create for us long-term stability, that in the eventuality of an election, whatever the outcome, violence cannot be the result of it. And violence will not be the weapon we use to find our way into government. And that is why, again, I reiterate and say, let this dialogue be about the country and not about any particular individual, because the outcome we want is for us to reduce these extended electioneering periods. It's good to state prior to joining the executive, I was an entrepreneur. And it is so sad for entrepreneurs in this country, because 2 years prior to an election, that nothing much happens in this country. It is just politics, politics, politics. Then after an election, we are now counting 1 year later. We are still again politicking. Another year passes, and again we start the campaigns towards 2027. At what point are we going to allow businessmen and business people in this country to operate? So I'm believing these talks should be geared towards ending these long-term extended electioneering periods. It should be geared towards ending violence, that everybody must accept the outcome of an election, irrespective of whether they won or they did not win.
But Honorable Kagiri, when you mention the Kenyan people and extended electioneering period, who is the problem here? Isn't it the politicians, you?
I certainly accept, and I give my own example. I said the outcome of the election is something that I accepted. I remember in the year 2017 at the Supreme Court, in the Maina case, I remember the Supreme Court ruled that the election ends at the polling station. And of course, even in this particular election, every other candidate accepted that the election ended at the polling station. But when we come to the presidential election, we have a candidate who does not accept that the election ended at the polling station. So in this case, my conversation is to that particular candidate. Can we accept outcomes of the elections? We have a country to progress, we have a country to continue running, and we accept many people voted for the other candidate. And that is why we are allowing for these talks. For the sake of those who voted for another candidate, the country must move on, and we must move on in unity and in togetherness.
Okay, and Kenyans have normally play their fair share of responsibility. The country is at peace, they are neighbors, they appreciate their ethnic cocktail, they have got no problems. It's when the politics comes in, and certainly you can see that very friction between the Kenyan people because of the animosity that comes or accompanies the political process. I'll come to you, Honorable Mbuya, as to why we need the talks, because we were here in 08 and 07, 08, and no nice words from the late Kofi Annan and company, and Benjamin Mkapa, the late Tanzanian president, who accused the country's political class of placing childish obstacles in the way of peace, and why they have locked out the likes of Karua and Ruto, then MPs Gishugu and Eldoret North constituencies, respectively, from the talks that led to the formation of the Grand Coalition government. Yes, Honorable Lote, before I come to you.
One thing that makes me very sick is the belief by the opposition that the street is the best way of solving issues in this country. The belief that when they go to the streets, then their problems are being solved, the Kenyans' problems are also being solved. In the contrary, when you go to the streets, everything in this country, everybody suffers, whether you are in the Azimio or in the Kenya Kwanza, or you are not aligned to any person. Because that is the time this country has lost. The fact that we are exchanging our dollar to 150 now, one Kenya shillings to 150, one shilling to $1 to 150 shilling, can also be attributed to the street protests that we've actually seen. And so the fact that there is still a leader that goes to the public and tells people that if the tax fails, then we go to the streets, this leader might not be very cognizant of the fact that he makes every Kenyan, including himself, suffer. That is one. Two, this is a country of talks. We've actually seen this country talking from the beginning. When Uhuru, not Uhuru, when Raila talked with Moi, and there was a tractor and Jogo merging together. That was a result of talks. We've actually seen during Nusumkate there were talks between Kibaki and Raila. And now we've also seen the handshake. That was a talk again between Uhuru and Raila. And now it is not anything different now that we're going to have a talk in Bomas. For me, I think we need to look at the supremacy of the Constitution. Under Article 1, the supremacy is on the people. Whether the people decide that this talk be done in Parliament or this talk be done in the streets, or whether these talks are done by anybody at Bomas or where, that is what the people want. So for me, I will not push that the talks be done by a specific group of people. It should be by what is agreed by Kenyans. And I think what we are doing now is, up to Friday, there is an agreement between the two teams, where Kalonzo Musyoka is the head of one team, and Kimani Ichung'wah is the head of the other team. So I think we are in the right path up to this point. And I want to appreciate the fact that with the team forming, the temperatures in this country have gone down. People are not talking about street protests any longer. But that is what makes me sick when somebody, even before the talks, says that if it fails, we will go to the streets. And I think this is what the Deputy President said. I don't think the Deputy President is contradicting the President. The Deputy President, if you listen to what he said clearly, the Deputy President was scoffing at what the people that have gone to the talks are about. It's all about the composition and all about the premeditative outcome that this team, the other team, the Kalonzo Musyoka team wants. And the reason why you find them telling you that we will go to the streets if it fails, what it means for them is we have what we want to come out of this talk. There is no talk that you go knowing what is coming out. It should be an agreement between the two. What this other team in the Azimio are saying is we have our agenda and our agenda needs to come out. If it doesn't come out, then we go to the street.
Okay.
I think that is the bad precedence.
Okay. Because he was clear in his words. So I don't know what you mean by what the Deputy President said.
I think if you listen to what he said...
Okay, let's listen to what he said.
Let's listen.
Okay, Ibrahim, can we have the Deputy President? Okay, we'll be having that soundbite shortly because there needs to be clarity around the wording here, and then we'll be hearing from the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga as well as to the context of what they said. Here's what Gachagua said.
Mazungumzo yanaendelea inaongozwa na Mheshimiwa Kalonzo. Hapo hakuna kitu mgoje. There is nothing for you to eat from there. 2018 Raila alienda handshake na Uhuru Kenyatta. Hakumwambia Kalonzo. Hakuenda na yeye. Akaenda akatengeneza deal yake na Uhuru Kenyatta wakamalizana. Project zote alitoa kwa Uhuru akapeleka kwao. Kuna project alileta kwa Ukamani? Lakini nyinyi hata hatuelewi nyinyi. Baada ya kufanyia nyinyi hiyo tena mkamfuata tena mkaamuka na yeye.
He said it clearly.
Okay.
He said mazungumzo inaendeshwa na Kalonzo. So it's not about the mazungumzo agenda. It is about the person Kalonzo. So for me, looking at it very clearly, he has not disparaged the articles of the discussions. He has not even talked about the agenda. He's just talked about Kalonzo's person.
He was clear. He says nothing will come out of it.
Kalonzo.
I mean, nothing will come out of it.
So he said nothing will come out of Kalonzo or of the talks that Kalonzo is involved in.
He meant the talks.
He meant the talks. It has nothing to...
He said, we can play it again.
Okay.
It's obvious. If you haven't heard and understood it, then I don't think even if you listen to it 100 times, it will change.
Okay. Honorable Mbuyi,
you know, let me say this. First and foremost, I think the reason my coalition leader said we may end up going back to the streets is because of those negative vibes that, nothing can come out of these talks. That's why he said, if then we have started these talks and they are not willing for them to proceed to a logical conclusion, then that gives us no option. And let me say this. I have had my colleague say that he gets sick and tired of hearing demos. Do you know multi-party democracy was born out of demonstrations, the Sabasaba, Nane Nane, Tisa Tisa in 1992. That is why we have multi-party democracy in this country. That is why we have coalitions that have got different, variety of parties. That's why it belongs to a political party, not just one party in the country. Secondly, the constitution that we've talked about, the beauty of devolution, the independence of the judiciary, the independence of parliament, those were also born out of demonstrations, blood, tears, and sweat of Kenyans. That is what demonstrations are there for. And this Article 2010, the Constitution of 2010 has also defined the rights of Kenyans to demonstrate and even given conditions and said you can be able to demonstrate as long as you are unarmed and you are peaceful. So basically, I think for anyone today to say that we want to rubbish, demonstrations is to ignore history and to ignore where we've come from. Even the struggle for independence was also born out of people losing lives and people losing property and people suffering. Okay. So we must agree that was a process we've gone through. Where we are now, we should be having peaceful demonstrations. We should be going out there in the streets with our placards and saying we are unhappy, the cost of living is too high. We carry our sufurias and say you must bring down the cost of unga. And when we do that, the police shouldn't shoot and kill us. The police should not maim us because the Constitution protects us from that.
Allow me to ask you this then.
Ask me.
Because the protests are allowed for in the Constitution. and in certain limited contexts.
Yes.
That you should be unarmed, you shouldn't be violent, you shouldn't cause chaos and destruction. What we have seen across the country in the days of the opposition protests were the looting of businesses, properties destroyed, and to some extent the damage also meted on one of the key facilities and infrastructures in the country, the expressway. I mean, do you condemn that as well?
Let me tell you this. I condemn any violence by any demonstrator or any policeman. And I have been involved in these demonstrations from the time I was elected up to now. And the fact is this, because it's important to speak from a perspective of having been involved. My car has been stoned by the police, led by none other than the current Inspector General of Police. A team of police officers that he was managing and leading was stoning our cars, broke all the windows of my vehicle. They threw tear gas inside my car, and they shot me and broke my leg. You know, if you ask me, the Constitution of 2010 was already in place. I was in my car. I had no weapons. What gave them the right to do that? So, you know, the thing is, unfortunately, the police are supposed to be there because they're supposed to be present. And if anyone attempts to do any vandalism, any, breakage into any looting, then they take action against that person. Not that person who is peacefully demonstrating. Because you cannot say that there is 1,000 people demonstrating and those 1,000 people are all looters.
Okay.
A few people, a few elements take advantage. And that's why the police are supposed to know about the demos so that they can come and provide security for the demonstrators that are peaceful and for the business owners.
Okay, and that's why seated here, I did ask you that question so that I get your position and you condemn the violence.
Yes, well, I do.
I did ask representatives from the government as to why it never pointed out the Minister of Interior the number of Kenyans who were killed by police. No documentation from the government, but it only mentioned police officers, though we still, of
There's
course,
a lot more who are killed.
Of course, condolences to the families of the police officers as well, but it never mentioned how many Kenyans were killed. Therefore, it's a question of accountability and objectivity. Yes, Honorable Med, I'll come to you, Honorable Lete. Yes.
Now, I will say this, and I think maybe I'm not really as old as Honorable Mbui, and he says that our democracy has been born out of sweat and blood, loss of lives and destruction
tears
of property and tears. And that is the cure that was to be brought by the 2010 Constitution. Article 37 is very clear. Mm-hmm. If we were to follow the objects of Article 37 on demonstration, then of course we will eliminate the question of blood and the tears. People go demonstrate, they will express their frustration. But just as you have rightfully asked, when somebody just goes to the expressway, there was no demonstrators, there was no nothing, they just go and they start vandalizing, they start vandalizing. Mm-hmm. There's no demonstration, nobody even knows why you're angry, you are just on the street, you start, vandalism. You come to town, you just want to destroy government and private property, you start throwing stones at policemen, then you're taking us to the blood and tears of 1992, which is not envisaged in the Constitution of 2010, because we have not seen. I'm happy that the Citizen was covering this demonstration live. Mm-hmm. We never saw that demonstrators were moving peacefully. We just saw demonstrators, they start throwing stones at the police retaliate, then it becomes bloody. A person is killed. And for anybody to imagine that you'd want to put this country back. Yeah. And let me say this, Ayub, for the avoidance of doubt. Since William Ruto was sworn in as president, there was about 6 months of peace and tranquility. So you know, say that the people of Kenya were angry because Raila Odinga lost. That anger only came when he came back and said, let us open the server, let us look at what was there in the elections. And he had taken his frustration to the court of, the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has admitted its verdict. Okay. That is the last resort. There's no, even if you come to the people a million times, the last resort is the Supreme Court. Once the Supreme Court has said, that is the architecture of our Constitution. Once it says that you lost the election, however much, however many times you come to the streets, even if people fight every day of the, you want them to fight every day, once that verdict has been met, then that is the end of it. So I am strongly opined that it is not a problem of the people of Kenya. It was not a problem of William Ruto. It was not a creation of any other person. It was a creation of Raila Odinga, because it is him who came back after some months of peace. Everybody was peaceful. Azimio was living peacefully and we were coexisting with our colleagues. We were with these people in parliament. There was never a problem. They had never said that President Ruto is illegitimate. They were contented.
Okay.
But after some time, then they came, raised the temperatures. Now they have called for the talks to lower the temperatures. Then they are saying that we shall then go back to the streets and kill people. What for?
Okay, allow me to get on.
It's the police that kill people.
Okay. Do you condemn as much as he condemned the violence, the police brutality?
Oh, yes, oh, yes.
Okay.
I did that last time we were here.
Okay. Honorable Kagere?
Thank you, Ayub. For me, I would want us to be very truthful to Kenyans. And first, I would want to mention, prior to the 1963, there was violence, there was demonstration towards us attaining our independence. Prior to multipartyism, there was demonstrations, there was tears, there was blood, there was everything for us to achieve multipartyism. Today, I would want to ask the Azimio coalition, what is our agenda, their agenda in the current violence that we're experiencing as a country? What is the expected outcome? Is it an individual to be recognized? Is it the cost of living to be lowered? And if you say the cost of living, I would want to correct you and tell you, the minute we cause businesses to close down, the minute we cause Kenyans not to go to work, that is not the cost of living we are lowering. In fact, we are taking it up. And again, when we cause violence and make sure investors don't come to a country which is not stable, again, it is not cost of living we are lowering. So my question to Azimio today would be, kindly tell us, what is this violence, this demonstration geared towards? And of course, when I saw the agenda on inclusivity, as part of the dialogue talks, I was a bit concerned. Because when we talk about inclusivity, are we talking about an individual? Because currently, as the Kenya Kwanza government stands, we have representation from each and every community. So I would want to understand, when we talk inclusivity, are we talking about an individual or a certain community, or what are we talking about? Recently, I was here and I stated, I was having a look at the ESP markets, the 181 ESP markets being constructed in the country. And I had a look at, I believe, Honorable Mbuiz from Machakos. Machakos is getting 7 markets constructed. Homa Bay is getting 5 markets constructed. I stop at Laikipia County, which is getting 2 markets constructed. Looking at the planning of those ESP markets, it was done in the prior regimes. And of course, Laikipia could not feature well in those markets because we were not pro the handshake. And that, of course, tells you we are having a president who is so inclusive, because looking at the current state and the money that has been allocated to these markets, the president would have looked and said these markets are in places that are not pro him. But because he's an inclusive president and he's here to serve every person who elected him and who did not elect him. Okay. He has ensured that development in this country will be evenly distributed and reach every corner of this country. So my question stands at, what is Azimio's demonstrations and violence geared towards?
Okay. Yes, Honorable Lote, before...
listening, there's a clip that was going around recently when there were demonstrations about the president of Tanzania. Mm-hmm. She was actually telling Tanzanians that she's seen investors that she has never seen before flocking into Tanzania.
Who fled Kenya?
Yeah, from Kenya. And she actually attributed it to the violence in our neighbors, and that was Kenya. That is the time we were doing demonstrations. When investors are moving to Tanzania because of demonstrations, which are actually orchestrated by Azimio, who is losing? Is it the Kenya Kwanza? Is it the government? Or is it the Kenyan citizens that are losing? I'll tell you it is the Kenyan citizens, because they are the ones that depend on the investments in this country. So if we are telling people that we want to further export industries to the neighboring countries, and we're saying that is a reduction of cost of living, I think we are lying to Kenyans straight to the eyes. So I think it is important for the Azimio people and for Kenya Kwanza to believe that we do not want to export our jobs to neighboring countries. This country has actually become a very stable country and a lot of investors that come in, but we are continually chasing them. Now the economy is a little bit stabilizing. The Azimio brigades are saying we want to go to the streets. 2, this, I want to go back to my point about what Gachagua said. This cannot be a government that speaks from both sides of the mouth. The president cannot be saying that he supports the talks, and Gachagua says he's not supporting the talk. Let us look at the third person. And I want to read what the third person says. That is the leader of majority, Kimani Ichung'wah, who also sits in this as a chair of the Kenya Kwanza. This is what he said over the weekend. We will sit down with Kalonzo Musyoka and agree that we will only dialogue as long as there are no threats for a predetermined outcome. Predetermined outcome. We are not engaging in dialogue out of weakness, but we are doing so to improve the stability and governance of this country. Okay. He says it very clearly, and I think that is what the deputy president says. There is no way in which the president can be supporting it. Kimani Ichung'wah, the leader of the majority, is supporting it, and Gachagua is not supporting it. Gachagua was looking at a person called Kalonzo Musyoka, and what is coming out is What he said in 2018, when Raila was making handshake with Uhuru, he did not invite Kalonzo. What is he saying? He says that Raila is capable of making his dialogues and be able to get outcomes out of it. But I think he was castigating one person called Kalonzo Musyoka.
Thank you.
That not being that, what I want to say in this respect is that the talks are encouraged, the peaceful coexistence among Kenyans is encouraged, and I think the president and the opposition leader Raila Odinga are also encouraging this dialogue. So anybody who comes here and says that the dialogue are not encouraged, that the dialogue are actually going to fail, is a person that wants to take this country back to the dungeons.
Okay. Yes, briefly before we go to the other topic.
Yeah, thank you. The issue of my party leader again being brought up by my colleague here is still not clear in my mind, because I heard what the deputy said. But yeah, let's just say that if then he's saying that he was disparaging my party leader, I would just ask the deputy president to have respect for also people that are older than him, and to also respect the venues. If you're in a bereavement area where people are mourning a dead one, you cannot start talking about a leader that is highly respected in the community, who actually marshaled all the people in that community to deliver votes in the side that he supports. The issue of violence, I want to state again that it is not the Azimio demonstrators that are violent. I did, and I'm speaking out of the ones who are in this studio. I am the one who's been involved in demonstrations. I'm telling you first-hand experience. I did demonstrations with my party leader Kalonzo Musyoka in my constituency in Kadhiani town. And there were thousands of people. And nobody, not even a single person, lost a potato or a tomato, because the people were peaceful. The police came, but the police did not chase anyone. Now, the minute the police are peaceful, then the demonstrations will also be peaceful. Now, the issue that we've raised in the talks about inclusivity, I want to make this clear, is because we have heard the deputy president continuously say Kenya is a company that is, a company that of shareholders, and that what you expect out of Kenya government is based on the shares that you hold in that government. We hold no shares in that government as people from Lower Eastern, because our votes were all cast in favor of Azimio. But that does not make us less Kenyans. So when you talk about inclusivity, we are saying when you are giving people jobs, government jobs, they are not for the regime, they are for the country. You must also consider people from the regions that didn't vote for you. That's what we mean by inclusivity. And that is why when you look at some of these appointments, state appointments, principal secretaries, I don't know which offices, you go to the energy sector, everyone is from one community. It's very unfair. And that's why we are saying, as you do your placement of people, as you do your development agenda, please let us make sure that the whole country, because Article 10 is very clear about inclusivity and fairness and regional balancing. So that's basically what we meant by that.
Okay, thank you. Let's now sample the feedback here on the broadcast, and then we finish up on this. And here's what you're saying on Twitter. The hashtag is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. The first one from Baba Michelle K says, while we welcome the amendment of the Constitution to better the piece of legislation, we also realize that this country isn't short of legislation, but rather abuse, if the present wants defying of court order, just as an example. Fred _Matiba says, I think we should not just jump to reviewing and change the Constitution. Instead, we should audit the Constitution, look at what we have achieved, what we have not implemented, what we have failed, where we have failed, then think of changing it. Brian Chemwa says amendments should strike a balance between preserving the Constitution's core values and allowing it to evolve in response to changing circumstances. But we need to fully adhere, enforce and support the 2010 Constitution. Fred Okwango says, while we can always amend the Constitution, the strength of our Constitution is entirely in the determination of each citizen, including the regime in place, to respect, uphold and defend it. San Nixon Ndugure says Constitution amendment process is another tool or avenue to form political parties, coalitions, strong divisions, and etc. He says that needs with a half-baked document. That's the main reason why we urge to amend it almost immediately after promulgation. J.M. Musoma says now that senior government officials have urgently hinted that the bipartisan talks will be fruitless, as Azimio should consider a return of BBI, one man, one vote, one shilling. Constitutional moment it is, that person says. And let's now shift our attention to what has happened on Friday.